Well everyone, now that the ultimate Jurassic World showdown is done between T-Rex and D-Rex, I say, a Tyrannosaurus Rex killer is now on the way. So it's time to make Asset 87, I do say. On this YouTube video today, we are starting our Jurassic World 3 Spinosaurus project, I say. And the first order of business today is making this dinosaur skeleton, I do say. Where we will be constructing it today out of oven-baked clay and armature wire and tinfoil to save on this dinosaur's weight, I say. And just a little bit of plasticine clay to help the bones stay. And along the way, we'll be going over what a scientifically accurate Spinosaurus really looked like today. First off, the Spinosaurus aegyptiacus was larger than a Tyrannosaurus rex, and was a very accomplished fisherman able to catch fish the size of bison. This ferocious predator from the late Cretaceous period is one of the most mysterious and controversial dinosaurs that ever lived, and its secrets are only just beginning to be undug. So today, on Moose Motion Animation, you could say we're diving into dangerous Cretaceous waters. So today, I think it's safe to say we're going to be picking a few bones with some people and discussing on what the Spinosaurus aegyptiacus actually looked like. But before I jump into more about the Spinosauridae, I'm just gonna do a quick self-promotion for the latest animation, I do say. So if you haven't seen, well, T-Rex vs. D-Rex yet, I suggest you go check that out because that's honestly probably one of the biggest and most work I've put into one of my dinosaur, well, animations so far. To help put that into perspective, that animation took about 4,670 photographs, hundreds of sound clips, and approximately just over a month to film, excluding all the time it took to make the characters as well as the diorama. And if you include the film set and all the characters involved in that animation, well, that entire project would have taken a person 6 months or half a year starting from scratch. And if you just so happen to be one of the few people tuning into this video today and haven't seen that animation yet, well, there is a link in the description of this video so you can check it out after we're done talking about the Spinosaurus. So let's start from the very beginning on the story of Spinosaurus. And this story starts all the way back in 1915 when it was discovered by German paleontologist Ernst Stromer, where he came across the remains of a fossilized theropod with 1.6 meter long jaws that were very narrow and large neural spines coming out of its backbones. And wanting to be descriptive as possible, he gave it the name Spinosaurus and sent the fossils to the Bavarian State Collection of Paleontology in Munich, where it was estimated to be around 97 million years old. But unfortunately, during World War II, these fossils were destroyed in a bombing of the city. And unfortunately, for decades, all we had left of those incredible fossils were basically diagrams. So due to this, for the longest time, Spinosaurus was imagined as a 16-meter-long Tyrannosaurus Rex with a crocodile-like face with a large sail coming out of its back. And arguably, was probably one of the coolest dinosaurs of all time, and personally, I still think it is. But unfortunately, this would be the last time that everybody had a unified vision of what this dinosaur truly looked like. But of course, the inevitable did happen. After about 100 years, more fossils were discovered. And well, that's when the paleo community started dividing into different groups. And this can also be contributed attributed to, well, a similar species being discovered in the 1980s, known as the baryonyx. It had massive claws on its hands well adapted for fishing, and had a lot of other similar traits to Spinosaurus, showing that these were potentially a family of dinosaurs, which was then classified as the Spinosauridae. And these related species is what helped scientists piece together what Spinosaurus looked like, by essentially filling in the gaps of what was missing on the prior specimen. And this also helped cemented its place for one of the largest theropods ever known. The long snout suggested a fish-heavy diet, and those huge claws on its hands would have helped grab prey close to the shore. And personally, fortunately, but also perhaps unfortunately, we did keep finding fossils, which contradicted our early interpretations of Spinosaurus. So first of all, their hind legs were revealed to be really short, especially compared to other theropods such as T.Rex, Allosaurus, and Giganotosaurus, and would more than likely make Spinosaurus a slow and awkward walker on land, but might have been a very good adaptation for life in the water. And the common theory is that those legs help this dinosaur swim like a crocodile. And since they already have a croc-like face, complete with ISOs on its face, and more than likely ate fish, it would have made a lot more sense for this creature to spend more time in the water in comparison to other dinos. And it was also discovered that the bones were far more dense in comparison to other theropods, which just so happens to be a common adaptation for most animals for buoyancy control. And this is a much bigger deal than most people would think, because up until this point, there had been no real true definitive evidence of a semi-aquatic dinosaur, unless a person decided to count, well, the earlier interpretation of sauropods, but that was proven to be false, and this is a Spinosaurus video. It should be mentioned there were plenty of other aquatic creatures at the time, such as, well, the Plesiosaurus and Mosasaurus. However, it is a very well-known fact amongst the paleo community at this point that those are obviously not dinosaurs. So this obviously made Spinosaurus very unique and weird, but things do get stranger, because then we found tail vertebra. The tail was revealed to be very long, narrow, and flat, very similar to the tail of an axolotl, which would have helped Spinosaurus propel itself in the water. It also happened to have long and strong toe bones similar to those found in modern-day shorebirds, suggesting that this dinosaur also had the capability to walk in muddy or very sandy soil. And there are some suggestions out there saying that they could also be possibly webbed. And I believe that was brought up in the most recent documentary, Walking with Dinosaurs, released in 2025. And as I also mentioned earlier, they also had fossil evidence of pressure sensors along this snout, much like you would find in modern-day crocodilians. And then the discovery of a large number of teeth in river environments suggests that they could have spent a lot of time in the water, if not perhaps all of their time in the water. But of course, that would have been far too easy of a conclusion for this debate, because evidence for a more land-based creature was also starting to mount. Body reconstructions of this creature suggest that it probably couldn't really stand fully upright in the water, unless it was moving forward. Not only that, the tail also seemed to be a bit too weak to be an effective means of propulsion like you see in crocodiles. It also would have been too massive and awkward to pursue prey underwater effectively. But perhaps the sail and tail were not made for balance, but perhaps could have been a display for breeding purposes, given the fact that, generally speaking, most useless adaptations in animal are used effectively just for that. A good example being the modern-day peacock. But I would like to expand upon the theory of the sail perhaps being a courtship display, given the fact that this dinosaur, well, shares a lot of traits with crocodilians, and now it's a well-known fact that most dinosaurs, well, use low-frequency sounds to communicate, as well as the crocodile. So essentially what I'm leading towards with this theory is that the sail perhaps could have been used as a courtship display using low-frequency bellowing sounds inside the water to create a perhaps, well, quite spectacular splashing display, similar to what you would see with modern-day crocodilians. But given the fact that this is a very large creature, and perhaps the stronger the bellowing that it would be making, the larger the water would travel up the sail, creating a almost water fountain-like effect, which is something to think about. Obviously, I'm not a paleontologist, I'm just an enthusiast, but it's fun to speculate about these types of things. But there's also a common theory that it could have been used as a thermal regulatory system, similar to what you see on elephants with their large ears. And if this creature is spending a large majority of its time in the water, that might not be a bad theory. But there's also another one out there that perhaps this was more like a bison's hump, where the sail could have been used as a fat storage deposit. Now, I'm briefly just going to admit, I personally kind of hope that's really not the case. I know that's a little biased of an opinion, but the only reason being is I have fear for what it would do to its name. I don't know if I can classify Humpasaurus as my favorite dinosaur if that happens. So depending on how you view this dinosaur, it could have been similar to a croc, or perhaps a wading predator like a grizzly bear, who just so happens to also specialize in fish, but is also capable of hunting prey on land as well as catch prey opportunistically. And the whole issue with this dinosaur is further complicated with the fact that only 6 specimens have ever been found. And of course, they've all been incomplete and of different ages and sizes. Making an accurate model of this, well, dinosaur is difficult. It's like trying to solve a 1,000-piece puzzle, but you only have 6 pieces. However, I should briefly mention I did actually make an attempt at this in 2020 in one of my early YouTube videos. And honestly, it seems to have held up fairly well so far. Now, if you want to check it out, I don't mind you, but bear in mind that was 5 years ago. It's probably not going to be near as good as what I do now. And it should be noted that every sail vertebra that we have ever found of this dinosaur has been broken. We don't even know how long they were exactly, or what shape they were, if it was an arch or perhaps in an M-like formation. And obviously, we still don't even know what its true purpose was for that matter. And even the tail is very controversial on how well it was actually truly adapted for the water. We're not even too sure on how it moved on land. Did it move like a grizzly bear, or was capable of perhaps, hopping up on its hind legs? Or was it more like a pangolin, using its tail for balance in order to walk on its 2 feet? We're not even sure on how good of a swimmer it truly was. However, the one thing that is certain about this dinosaur, it did like to eat fish, and it did spend a lot of its time near the water fishing. And we know that it was one of the largest theropods that ever lived, and, well, most importantly, it was one of the coolest dinosaurs that ever walked the planet Earth. So if you just so happen to be a paleontologist in Africa looking for, well, specimens of Spinosaurus, we need you more than ever, well, to help solve some of these debates. Because up until more discoveries are made, I believe this dinosaur is going to remain among the most controversial dinosaurs on the internet. But that's all the fun facts we have for today on the Spinosaurus Aegyptiacus, I say. Not a whole lot of time for the build rundown today because I went on a bit of a rant, you could say. But I think I gave a pretty good description at the beginning of today's video, you might say. So I'm happy to say from here on out we'll be working on part 2 today of the Spinosaur Day, where Plasticine Clay will be covering our Jurassic Park 3 Spinosaura Day, I do say. So stay tuned, I say, because more Asset 87 content will soon be heading your way. Hey, thanks for sticking around to the very end of the video. Be sure to leave a like if you enjoyed the content, comment below what you think, share with your friends, and perhaps consider subscribing if anything. Anyway, that's enough from me. Till next time, take it easy.